Next on Newsmax Prime, sparks fly in South Carolina. Ted Cruz takes off the gloves and makes a big TV buy attacking Donald Trump. Our political panel takes the pulse of the Palmetto State. On a more somber note, the state of law enforcement in America. 7 cops killed in the last 7 days. Bernie Carrick will talk about this disturbing trend. Overseas, we could call it unsettled. Diplomats claim a cessation of hostilities in Syria, but it's uncertain that will develop into a genuine ceasefire. And North Korea is a genuine nuclear power. So what is the right course of action for the U.S.? Newsmax Prime starts right now. Good evening and welcome to the Friday night edition of Newsmax Prime. I'm J.D. Hayworth. Of prime interest tonight, a South Carolina slugfest. Nobody is pulling their punches there, least of all Ted Cruz. Here's the latest TV ad from the Cruz campaign.
I'm Ted Cruz, and I approve this message.
Vera Koking's home was all she had left, but it stood in Donald Trump's way and the limousine parking lot he wanted for his casino. To him, she was a nobody. So Trump schemed with Atlantic City government to force Koking from her home using eminent domain.
You're bullying these people out because
Excuse me. This is a government case. This is not Donald Trump.
Yes, it's Donald Trump. It's you and your cronies in government working together.
Public power, private gain.
For more on this story, we're pleased to be joined on this Friday night by our political panel. First, from Newsmax New York, chief political correspondent for USA Radio Network's Scottie Nell Hughes. And from Newsmax Washington, the noted Republican strategist Ford O'Connell. Thanks to you both for your time tonight on Newsmax Prime. So, Scottie Nell, the Donald turned to his favorite social media platform, Twitter, and tweeted this about Ted Cruz. How can Ted Cruz be an evangelical Christian when he lies so much and is so dishonest? Wow. They really aren't pulling the punches, are they, Scottie Nell?
They are really pulling the punches, which is sad. Now, you look in South Carolina, they're used to having dirty politics. Hello, Frank Underwood from House of Cards is based off of a politician from South Carolina. So they're used to this. However, this is what's interesting. We've seen in the last 48 hours, Mr. Trump has replaced his attack ad against Senator Cruz with more of a positive ad about himself. So they're sitting there looking and feeling that that message is going to resonate. Now, as for Mr. Trump's tweet, he's absolutely correct. In the last 24 hours, you have seen Senator Ted Cruz sit there and accuse Donald Trump of being pro-gay marriage and pro a lot of the things that these evangelicals definitely don't want to have in their presidential candidate. It is a lie. Mr. Trump has come out and said that he's more for traditional marriage as well as he's against abortion. And so I think it's one of those things that, you know what, I'm sorry if it's negative. It's called the truth. And Senator Cruz should know better than to sit there and pull out these kind of lies in a state like South Carolina. It's not working.
Ford, your take on this?
Well, I'm not a homer for Mr. Trump, so I don't have to call the Donald Mr. Trump, unlike Scottie Nell Hughes. Let me say this. The next 4 weeks are very, very important for the Ted Cruz campaign. If they're going to win the nomination, it's going to start in South Carolina because it's highly evangelical, even more than Iowa. It's more to Ted Cruz's way, and Donald Trump knows that if he can shut down Ted Cruz over the next couple of weeks, he's going to escape to the nomination with a plurality of votes.
All right, let's move from Twitter back to TV, Scottie Nell, and you touched on this a few minutes ago, the fact that Mr. Trump is taking a different approach in his television ads. Initially, we thought the front runner was going to open with an attack on Cruz, but that ad was pulled and replaced with a positive message. Let's see a segment of it.
I came to hear Donald Trump's business plan for America.
It's really cool to hear him speak the truth. Sounds like it is.
Make America great. As a guy who's an international student, Trump is speaking of the truth.
He wants to make America great, and that's what I want to.
We have a country that we're proud of and that we love and that we're not going to lose. There is an assault on everything that we stand for, and we're going to stop the assault. We will make America great again.
So, a positive message. Now, Scottie Nell, you mentioned the rough and tumble of South Carolina politics. Is the positive message going to work for Donald Trump?
I think it is, but you have to remember the latest polls that have just come out today, JD, has Mr. Trump at 36 and Ted Cruz at 20. So even if it doesn't, there's a little bit of that cushioning message. There's that little cushion right there of 16 points, and it's been holding steady for the past few weeks that are going to work. The other thing you have to realize is what Mr. Trump is saying against Senator Ted Cruz. They said, you know, the people of South Carolina like to see how people throw punches, but more importantly, how they handle their punches. And they've watched, if you've watched Donald Trump over the past few weeks, you've realized he's gotten both in handled them very well. Also with the evangelicals, as Ford pointed out, Mr. Trump is leading them by 10 points. So obviously, they're not buying the Senator Cruz, you know, talk. They're actually looking at what he's doing and going negative. Mr. Trump needs to do everything he can to show that he's exactly opposite of whatever course that the Cruz campaign is taking.
Ford, positive TV from the Donald, but his tweets are fairly rough and tumble against Ted. Is that going to really be the game plan? Be sweetness and light on television and go brass knuckles via social media?
Well, exactly. That's exactly right. You want to be positive on TV, put on a happy face, and behind closed doors and down in the grassroots of South Carolina, you got to get into bare knuckle fighting. Here's what Donald Trump knows. He knows that this is also about ground game because this is a winner-take-all by congressional district format, which actually favors Ted Cruz here. So, look, you may wind up with South Carolina looking a lot like Iowa, where Donald Trump has this huge lead in the polls, and basically he's got to try to find a way to run out the clock on Ted Cruz, and that's why he's testing positive and negative messages through various channels.
On that
note.
Okay,
but wait here, Ford, I would like to point out something. The Ford just used his Southern accent, which I take kind of offense, like I take when Hillary Clinton comes down south and talks about Southern things.
Wait a minute, let's not
judge.
You got to know.
Except I'm from the South, so keep going.
Yeah, we're all Southerners here, so don't question culture and heritage here. Now, look, here's the point, though, Scotty, to what Ford had to say. We are hearing talk that the Cruz ground game is exponentially stronger than it was in Iowa. They're preparing to knock on their 100,000th house door this weekend. So how do you beat that kind of ground game?
It's real simple. It's because the truth. That is the one thing. And yes, you want to look at the Twitter being negative. As long as the truth is getting out there in whatever message. Also, you have to look at the endorsements. Right now, you've got the establishment split right now between Marco Rubio and Jeb Bush, which means there's a small little group in there that actually, if you unite them behind a candidate, as it looks like Mr. Trump is doing, you're guaranteed a success. And so, I agree that going out and knocking on doors is a wonderful way for campaigning. Maybe when you're running for mayor, maybe when you're running for local office. But right now, social media, when people can tweet out and get a response from a presidential candidate, that is 10 times better than some college student who's volunteered to knock on a door, I assure you.
Really, that proved really successful for you in Iowa, right? Look, here's the deal. Okay, here's what Mr. Trump wants to do, and I'm going to call Mr. Trump to be nice here, and that is he's about message, touch, and celebrity. And really the way you win a state like South Carolina because of the format is message, touch the voter, mobilization. And here's what I fear for Donald Trump if I'm working for Donald Trump, and that is that I may lose South Carolina because I don't want to invest in that ground game.
Oh, that's not it. Investment does not work. Let's look at what happened in New Hampshire. Let's take your justification there. Jeb Bush went in there and spent $40 million and came in, what, fourth, fifth, whatever. You have Mr. Trump goes in there and spends $3 million, wins overwhelmingly by number one. It's not necessary, and he had a little bit better ground game, but nowhere compared to the investments of the other guys. It's all about, people are tired of fake. People are tired of phony, and that is the one thing. It's all about messaging and honesty right now. So you can have people knocking on doors and doing slick emails and slick commercials forward, but in the state of South Carolina, they actually can see through the BS. They're tired of it, and they actually want to see a candidate who actually has produced results. Something that Mr. Trump, who appreciates your respectful title, is obviously getting within the polls of South Carolina.
Let me step in here because I've got to change to BS from its common terminology. Let me change it to Bush strategy. Jeb Bush on ABC's Good Morning America earlier today, responding to Donald Trump's allegations that bringing in President George W. Bush on the campaign trail is a sign of desperation. Let's watch and listen.
Well, look, he's been supportive for a long while. This was the appropriate place for him to start his campaigning. This is the beginning of the campaign. What Donald Trump says about my brother has no relevance to this. He is popular because he kept us safe. People here are pro-military, pro-veterans. My brother served as commander-in-chief, and people respect that.
So what about that, Ford? Bringing in a former commander-in-chief named Bush going to help Jeb?
Look, it is absolutely a sign of desperation for Jeb. Understand that there's a second game going on here in South Carolina beyond Cruz v. Trump, and that is what has happened with that muddled mainstream lane between Rubio, Kasich, and Bush. And if Bush doesn't outrun Marco Rubio in South Carolina, guess what? The donors are going to cut off the spigot, and he's going to be going back to Florida.
Scottie Nell, we had North Carolina Republican consultant Mark Rotterman on this program last night. He says that the Bush family ties to South Carolina make Jeb the dark horse there in the Palmetto State. Do you agree?
I absolutely disagree. And if you know North Carolina versus South Carolina, they're actually very different politically. North Carolina is based on banking and actually a lot more blue. South Carolina is very red as long as you're not looking on the East Coast around the Charleston area. And the question about bringing the Bushes in, you know, you're sitting here with Sarah Palin and Jerry Falwell Jr. sitting there and endorsing people like Mr. Trump. Even Ted Cruz has some heavyweights that have endorsed him. When you have to bring in your mother and your brother, the desperation shows on that. And let's remember, the reason why we're living with 8 years of Barack Obama is because of the last 2 years of the Bush administration and the absolute economic collapse and failure of policy that caused us to get into the turmoil that we're in today.
All right, we got about a minute 30 left. We'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the Democrats and their debate last night. Things were a little heated after Hillary took aim concerning Bernie Sanders' plans as president. Let's watch and listen.
So we have a special obligation to make clear what we stand for, which is why I think we should not make promises we can't keep.
Well, Secretary Clinton, you're not in the White House yet.
So that was just a sample of it. What about this, Ford? And I'm going to give you 20 seconds each for the final word on this. Ford, first to you. Who comes out stronger, both from that debate and, more importantly, post-South Carolina primary on the Democrat side?
Well, it really all depends on whether or not Hillary Clinton is able to hold on to the black vote in South Carolina. If she can hold on to the black vote in South Carolina, that coupled with the delegates means she is still inevitable. But I have to say that Bernie Sanders is getting right underneath her chin.
All right, Scottie Nell, the lady gets the absolute last word.
There were 3 people on that stage last night: Bernie, Hillary, and Barack. And unfortunately, Barack actually looked like the winner between all 3 of them.
Fair enough. Scottie Nell Hughes at Newsmax New York. Ford O'Connell right there at Newsmax Washington. We appreciate what you have to say. And we wonder what you have to say about the campaign in South Carolina and elsewhere. Why don't you send your comments to me at newsmaxtv.com/comments. Later tonight, Johnny Depp as Donald Trump. You'll see that satire, and we will be back to talk